Kelly Bricker is a professor of sustainable tourism and she is also interim chair at the University of Utah in the Department of Parks and Recreation and Tourism. She completed her PhD research with the Pennsylvania State University, where she specialized in sustainable tourism and natural resource management. Dr. Bricker has special research interest in ecotourism, sense of place, natural resource management, and the environment and social impacts of tourism. With collaborators Rosemary Black and Stuart Cottrell, she authored and edited a book titled Sustainable Tourism and the Millennium Development Goals. With her husband, Nathan, she's developed an ecotourism operation called Rivers Fiji and serves as the chair, and she also serves as the chair of the International Ecotourism Society, the Research and Education Council. She's vice chair and treasurer of the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Please join me in welcoming Dr. Kelly Bricker.
Thank you, Michael. Good morning, everybody. I'm going to take just 1 minute of my time and have everybody stand up and stretch.
Oh, what a good idea.
How do I get this back to you? I'm going to close that and then start it again, so pause it.
No, that's
Okay.
a good idea.
All right.
Good idea.
Everybody's ready for me now, I hope. It's certainly a wonderful pleasure to be here today, and I want to thank Canisius College and certainly the Institute for the Study of Human-Animal Relations. Had this been a major back in the day when I was in school, I would have jumped at this. It sounds wonderful, and certainly with some of the students we've talked with, it sounds like just an excellent career path and a worthy cause in this world that we live in today. What we have learned from ecotourism really is that it not only intersects as a tool for conservation, but it's a part of a larger system. And so that's a lot of what I'm going to talk about today. Its people, its places, and destinations or regions actually are part of a political and institutional framework upon which they operate. And that said, I think a distinguishing feature of ecotourism lays claim to that it must benefit biodiversity conservation, whether we're talking about individuals or entire ecosystems. And this ultimately links to our human health and well-being. So I think that intersection is really critical. In many ways, ecotourism has provided principles and concepts that all tourism endeavors can aspire. And I think some of the talks earlier today mentioned some of these ideas. So my approach today is really to highlight some of the systematic concerns with respect to tourism as a global development tool. And this obviously would include ecotourism. And as human beings, we exist as part of this system. And with other species, therefore, there exists this interdependency and interplay that's really critically important, with the health of humans highly dependent upon this healthy ecosystem. So I'm going to try something a little bit different than the typical PowerPoint. Once I hit go, we go with this video, and I'm going to try and keep up with it. So here we go. So my contribution today is a culmination of my interest based on the research work that I do at the University of Utah, my involvement with the International Ecotourism Society since 2001, and a fairly new organization as of 2010, the Global Sustainable Tourism Council. Ecotourism has the opportunity to continue playing a leadership role in shaping a more sustainable society, and one that brings real benefit to biodiversity conservation. However, it is necessary to gain a much greater understanding of tourism growth and the impact on communities and its direct relationship to the protection of biodiversity. So I'll begin by sharing some of the serious challenges we face related to sustainable production and consumption of our planet's resources. Following, I will review some of the examples that highlight benefits of ecotourism and its relationship to addressing environmental and societal challenges. So let's take a look at some of those challenges we face today. We are losing the Earth's greatest biological treasures just as we are beginning to appreciate their true value. Rainforests was once covered 14% of the Earth's land surface, now cover a mere 6%. And the experts estimate that the last remaining rainforest could be consumed in less than 40 years. And 1.5 acres of rainforest are lost every second, with tragic consequences for both developing and industrial countries. No group of animals has a higher rate of endangerment than amphibians. Frogs, toads, and salamanders are disappearing because of habitat loss, water, air pollution, and climate change, ultraviolet light exposure, and introduced exotic species and disease. Because of their sensitivity to environmental challenges, vanishing amphibians should be viewed as the canary in the global coal mine. Signal like subtle yet radical ecosystem changes that could ultimately claim many other species, including humans. Birds also occur in nearly every habitat on the planet and are often the most visible and familiar wildlife to people across the globe. As such, they provide an important bellwether for tracking changes to the biosphere. Declining bird populations across most of all of our habitats confirm that profound changes are occurring on our planet in response to human activities. Habitat loss and degradation have caused most of the bird declines, but the impacts of invasive species captured by collectors also play a big role in all of this. Another species, fish, increasing demand, water, the damming of rivers throughout the world, the dumping and accumulation of various pollutants, and of course, again, invasive species make aquatic ecosystems some of the most threatened on the planet. Thus, it's not surprising that there are many fish species that are endangered in both freshwater and ocean and marine habitats. The American Fisheries Society identified 700 species of freshwater or anadromous fish in North America as being imperiled, accounting to 39% of all fish on the continent. In North America marine waters, at least 82 fish species are imperiled, and across the globe, 1,851 species of fish, which equates to 21% of all fish species evaluated. And these were deemed at risk by extinction by the IUCN in 2010, including more than a third of sharks and rays. Invertebrates, from butterflies to mollusks to earthworms to corals, are vastly diverse. And although no one knows just how many invertebrate species do exist, they estimate to account for about 97% of the total species of all animals on Earth. Of the 1.3 million known invertebrate species, the IUCN has evaluated over 9,500 species and found that 30% of these species evaluated are at risk of extinction. Freshwater invertebrates are severely threatened by water pollution, groundwater withdrawal, and water projects, while a large number of invertebrates of notable scientific significance have become either endangered or extinct due to deforestation, especially because of the rapid destruction of our tropical rainforest. And in the ocean, reef-building corals are declining at an alarming rate. 2008's first ever comprehensive global assessment of these animals revealed that a third of reef-building corals are now threatened. Overall, the IUCN estimates that half of the globe's 5,491 known mammals are declining in populations, and a fifth are clearly at risk of disappearing forever, with no less than 1,131 mammals across the globe classified as endangered, threatened, or vulnerable. In addition to primates, marine mammals, including several species of whales, dolphins, and porpoises, are among those mammals slipping most quickly toward extinction. Globally, 21% of the total evaluated number of reptiles in the world are deemed endangered or vulnerable to extinction by the IUCN. That includes 594 species in total, while in the United States alone, 32 reptile species are at risk, and that's about 9% of the total overall. Island reptile species have been dealt the hardest blow, with at least 28 island reptiles having died out since 1600. The main threats to reptiles, again, are habitat destruction and the invasion of non-native species which prey on reptiles and compete with them for habitat and food. As we all know and are aware, through photosynthesis, plants provide oxygen we breathe and the food we eat, and are thus the foundation of most life on Earth. They are also the source of a majority of medicines in use today. Of the more than 300,000 known species of plants, the IUCN has evaluated 12,914, finding that about 68% of those evaluated are threatened with extinction. Unlike animals, plants can't really move as their habitat is destroyed, making them particularly vulnerable to extinction. Already, scientists say that warming temperatures are causing quick and dramatic changes in the range and distribution of plants around the world, with plants making up the backbone of ecosystems and the base of the food chain. That's really bad news for all species, which depend on plants for food, shelter, and survival. As natural capital and ecosystem services start to experience increased stress and become ever less abundant in the future, we can only expect the value of nature to actually increase. According to Walker and Scott in 2006, who have written a great deal about the idea of resilience thinking, as we move deeper into the 21st century, we cannot afford to lose more of our resource base. An example of our planet providing resources to support basic human needs is the Food and Agricultural Organization of the United Nations reported that 842 million people, or 1 in 8 people in the world today, were estimated to be suffering from chronic hunger, regularly not getting enough food to conduct an active life. We live in and are part of an ecosystem, and as such, our health and well-being is tied closely to our ability to sustain biodiversity and a vibrancy of this ecosystem services that supports our planet. Another example of the planet providing basic human needs is water. If the current water consumption patterns continue unabated, half the world's population will live in water-stressed river basins by 2025, roughly 10 years from now. In daily life, regions and businesses are interlinked into a web of people and nature, driven and dominated by the manner in which they respond to and interact with one another. They are complex systems continually adapting to change. The current ruling paradigm that we can optimize components of a system in isolation of the rest of the system is proving inadequate to deal with the dynamic complexity of daily life. Sustainable solutions to our growing resource problems need to look beyond a business as usual approach. So when considering the health of a planet, why should we consider tourism and tourism's impact with respect to sustainability, ecotourism, resource production and consumption, global development, and the health and well-being of communities? Tourism is a significant economic driver. It ranks fourth after fuels, chemicals, and automotive products in the global export markets. With an industry value of $1 trillion a year, accounting for 30% of the world's exports of commercial services, or 6% of total exports. An ever-increasing number of destinations have opened up and have invested in tourism, turning tourism into a key economic driver through socioeconomic processes such as export revenues, the creation of jobs and enterprises, and infrastructure development. And despite the occasional setbacks, international tourist arrivals have shown virtually uninterrupted growth. And according to the UNWTO's long-term forecast, international tourism arrivals worldwide will increase by just over 3% a year from 2010 to 2030, reaching 1.8 billion people traveling the world globally by 2030. Due to the size and reach of the tourism sector on our planet, its enormous growth rates and risk of negative impacts, sustainable development and management of this tourism system becomes more and more important. In order to achieve a balance between a healthy ecosystem, biodiversity conservation, poverty reduction, quality of life, and high satisfaction, as well as long-term business success. Certainly, the United Nations World Tourism Organization has recognized this. I don't know if they have in the appropriate order, but they say that tourism development must take full account of its current and future economic, social, and environmental impacts, addressing the needs of visitors, the industry, the environment, and its host communities. The commitment put forward by the Millennium Development Goals, which are done this year, 2015, called for the international community to rally around an expanded vision of poverty reduction and pro-poor growth that situates human development at the center of social and economic progress. It also recognized the critical role that biodiversity conservation plays in supporting these concepts, particularly the dependence of the poor on natural resources. Over the past couple of years, together with colleagues from all over the world, we had the opportunity to explore tourism's contribution to actually addressing some of these Millennium Development Goals. The following examples will highlight the future challenges and opportunities for ecotourism and sustainable tourism's contribution, including poverty reduction, the empowerment for women and gender balance, ensuring environmental sustainability and conservation, and the critical development of partnerships. Local economic effects of tourism are determined by the share of tourism spending in local economies, as well as the amount of the resulting indirect economic activities. Our synthesis demonstrated that increasing the involvement of local communities, especially the poor communities, in the tourism value chain can contribute to the development of local economies and end poverty and reduce poverty. The extent of the direct benefits to communities and poverty reduction will largely depend on the percentage of tourism needs that are locally supplied, such as products, labor, tourism services, and increasingly green services in energy and water efficiency and waste management. There's also increasing evidence that more sustainable tourism in rural areas can lead to more positive poverty-reducing effects. For example, the tourism sector provides a vast number of jobs to workers with little or no formal training. It can provide opportunities to those facing social and skills disadvantages in a way not always offered by other industries. According to the International Labor Organization and many others, tourism's value chain and its significant connections to other sectors such as agriculture, construction, utilities, and transport can contribute to poverty reduction with regard to supply chain in tourism. One job in the core of tourism, for example, indirectly supplies and generates 1.5 additional jobs. Another goal was to eliminate gender disparities in primary and secondary education and at all levels within society. A number of the case studies demonstrated that tourism can promote gender equality and empower for women in a variety of ways. And one of the examples I'd like to show is an example, Kennedy mentioned Costa Rica, and there's a lot of examples from Costa Rica that we can learn from, and so I'd like to share one of those examples. There's an island called Chira Island in Costa Rica where a small group of women were credited as agents of change and gained empowerment and reduced poverty through a small-scale ecotourism project. They have also linked their project with other community producers, resulting in greater community benefit and empowerment. From the women of Chira Island's perspective, tourism has resulted in monthly revenues that provide their families with food, clothing, housing, and access to some recreational activities. There's also access to the national health care system, providing health insurance for their families. They have financial means now to get access to health care and seek it out. Increased employment skills have included hospitality, related activities, communication, interpretation, and operating boats. From a women's empowerment perspective, women who created the project feel their tourism project has provided opportunities for direct support to a women's crafts group, influencing community behavior, including better management of coastal resources, protecting reefs, fisheries, and mangroves, and through visitors, a greater awareness of educational opportunities and an increased desire to travel by community members. They've also had an enhanced community pride, public recognition for their project, and as one woman explained, and I quote, "More than my personal growth, it is important to see this change in my community. It has been marvelous to feel self-empowered, to dream about things that we have this infrastructure after having nothing more than mud under our nails. We see that it is possible to dream of more. These are simply brief examples of the ability of tourism projects to cut across gender barriers and work effectively towards poverty alleviation. There are several Millennium Development Goals that have tried to address the idea of health. So what is health, and how does that relate to sustainable tourism? Well, just as the international conservation and development organizations have had to recognize the importance of addressing poverty concerns for long-term conservation success, sustainable tourism must continue to look for creative strategies to support the economic, social, and environmental balance. When evaluating the relationship between a healthy planet and sustaining healthy people, communities, and nations, the intricacy of this vast web of interrelationships becomes even clearer. Sustainable tourism operations aspire to be more energy efficient and more climate sound. They aspire to consume less water, minimize waste, conserve biodiversity, support cultural heritage and traditional values, and support intercultural understanding and tolerance. They also generate local income and integrate local communities with a view to improving livelihoods and reducing poverty, which in turn contribute to health and quality of people's lives. And while the world itself is finite, increasing numbers of people are going to populate the world, and travel to and fro is going to make it possible for the world's peoples to get to know one another and impact one another in ways we have yet to imagine. The prospect of an international community increasingly transmigrating and transmingling brings with it reason for optimism and pessimism. The optimism resides in the possibility that tourism, when practiced sustainably, can lead to greater cross-cultural understanding, peace, well-being, and prosperity. However, the pessimism resides in the possibility that tourism, when practiced unsustainably, can lead to cross-cultural misunderstanding, disease, and poverty. And nowhere is this dual-edged prospect more pronounced than in the context of humans and environmental health. In the review of our case studies, we found that a sustainable tourism industry has an important role to play in fostering tourism in a way that also promotes health and involving local communities. We sit sometimes at a crossroads of employees, travelers, government agencies, political boundaries, and the tourism industry is ideally situated to mitigate the spread of certain diseases, devastating diseases such as HIV/AIDS, malaria, and other major diseases that seem to be well into the social media and our media today. So what we also found was that fulfilling this responsibility can take place in three ways. We can educate and protect tourism workers. We can educate travelers and collaborate with government agencies outside the box, such as ministries and healthcare providers, to create policies and practices that promote health. The aim is to have multiple stakeholders involved to create and implement effective disease prevention measures and an ecological perspective that provides a good vantage point from which government agencies can think about relationships among health, education, economies, communities, and individuals. Government agencies should welcome partnerships between ministries of health, tourism, education, as well as collaborations with businesses and the private sector, such as, an example, tourism operators. For example, the Ministry of Tourism in Barbados did something sort of out of the box and recently worked with the Barbados Hotel and Tourism Association and the National HIV/AIDS Commission to draft a policy that reduces discrimination and stigma and promotes supportive services and education among tourism workers about the transmission and prevention of HIV/AIDS. As recognized in the Millennium Development Goals, human health is dependent on biodiversity and on the natural functioning of a healthy ecosystem. Further, people depend on the planet for medicines that originate from diverse types of ecosystems. These ecosystems also help us understand disease, support the food web on which people depend, and reduce the risk of contracting infectious diseases. As such, another Millennium Development Goal is to ensure environmental sustainability, which is a centerpiece for sustaining health in all of its manifestations. Threats to biodiversity and the consequences of its losses, including the obvious ecological consequences, as well as the impact on aesthetic, ethical, sociological, and economical aspects of our world, reveal the reality of dependence on a healthy planet. Tourism relies on a destination's natural and cultural resources that communities also depend on for their livelihoods and quality of life. This is a critical issue in developing countries where communities are dependent on the natural resources for food, firewood, construction materials, water, and handicrafts. In addition, given the dependency of tourism on natural and cultural resources for life-sustaining elements, attractions, and activities, it is essential that these resources are not depleted by tourism activities. To highlight some of these ideas, I would like to share a project I have been involved in since 1998 called Rivers Fiji. Rivers Fiji began as a whitewater rafting and kayaking operation. To protect the river canyon, Rivers Fiji convinced the leaseholding logging company with landowners and the Native Land Trust Board, or government leasing organization, to work with indigenous landowners on a lease for conservation. In return for that lease, Rivers Fiji compensates landowners directly through lease payments, user fees, and employment opportunities. In 2000, the company established the Upper Navua Conservation Area, which is a 24-kilometer canyon, which is now protected from commercial extractive use within the primary corridor, 200 meters from each side of the river. This is the first lease for conservation of its kind in Fiji and possibly all of the South Pacific. For trips on the Upper Navua, each of the 9 Matangali, or landowner groups, and 2 adjacent villages have the opportunity to have their community members working with Rivers Fiji, but also guides have additional opportunities for obtaining employment through various other activities that the company does. This unique conservation effort calls for tourist dollars to support the protection of Fiji's third largest freshwater drainage and home to unique species of fish, parrots, and iguanas, and Fiji's only boa constrictor and the largest intact groves of sago palm, which are now threatened in the rest of the Pacific. Since the formation of the Upper Navua Conservation Area, the river has been designated as Fiji's first and to date only wetland of international importance as part of the International Ramsar Convention. Some of the things we have learned from this operation are that ecotourism can serve as a wedge to further development of all types, and as such, it was critical to develop a strategy with the local communities to conserve the natural capital or natural environment upon which this operation depends. We also learned that a relatively small ecotourism operation can have positive impacts on a region. Ecotourism has expanded employment through direct and indirect employment opportunities. Ecotourism has added economic diversity to what has typically been farm and logging communities in the region. Communities have had growth and diversification to their remote region, typically cut off from the positive benefits of tourism that occur in the coastal areas. Communities and government have had additional economic reasons to protect the cultural and natural resources found within the Upper Navua Conservation Area. And communities have increased opportunities for increased educational opportunities and linkages to other systems within the country. There have been ancillary health and well-being activities which have emerged, including the development of schools, health clinics, and improved technology for drinking water. Rivers Fiji operation has been an impetus for greater conservation and an example for the region. To enhance conservation of the area's fragile ecosystems, environmental outreach programs were developed through a partnership between Rivers Fiji and Nature Fiji, which is a local NGO in the country. Together, they provide local communities with a series of environmental education river trips to experience firsthand the economic, environmental, and cultural importance of their own backyard. In an effort to inspire future decision makers, these programs are designed to motivate children and their families to think about sustainability and other conservation-based benefits for the future. The results have been inspiring and brought an increased understanding to communities in and around Fiji's first and only Ramsar site. So let's take a look at this Pacific Island project and what some of the people in Fiji actually think about it.
Conducting awareness campaigns to the children of these Matangali, and really the aim of that is to bring about a sense of pride in the children to know that their elders made a good decision to conserve this Upper Naval Conservation Area, and that they will inherit it in the future, and that they will be the ones who will be managing it in the future.
It sounds minute, but it carries a lot of weight when we think of it, because when we visit this site, we must not leave anything behind to create damages to this nice, pristine environment. This is the first time I'm here, and I really want to say now is that we should promote more of this in Fiji, because it is creating employment for the resource owners, and at the same time increasing their capacity on why environment is important. And also it is a source of capacity building for policymakers and officials from government, non-governmental organizations and business community. That there is a way which we can utilize our environment in making income rather than damaging it.
For future generation, it's really good for us to protect this place here, because firstly, apart from the money that the tourists usually give it to the Rivers Fiji, part of the money goes back to the people in the village. For us, what we normally do for the money that the tourists they give it to the village, we put it in the bank, and when our kids they did well in school to go to high school or uni, we use this money for them.
So it's so important that they work together with Rivers Fiji.
It's really important to work together with Rivers Fiji, because we protect this place here. We don't let mine companies or logging companies to come around here. They might destroy lots of things.
And I think we'll be passing down from generation, from me to my family and to the next 4 generations.
I think we all know that the development of tourism is accompanied by significant challenges in the form of non-renewable energy, intensive transportation, excessive water consumption compared with residential use, discharges of untreated water, generation of waste, damage to terrestrial and marine environments, and the threats to the survival of local cultures, built heritage, and traditions. Cases from around the world have demonstrated that ecotourism can play a significant role in conservation of natural resources in many parts of the world, and that virtuous cycle of ecotourism leads to a self-reinforcing activity of positive attitudes and visitation to natural area sites. This visitation provides support for conservation in several ways. Tourism spending that supports local economies. Tourists may donate time or money to conservation projects and may lobby governments to support biodiversity conservation projects. However, key challenges to the link between ecotourism and biodiversity conservation long-term include the growing global population that will put pressure on remaining natural areas, habitat loss, climate change, and invasive species. While climate change has been addressed through some environmental and tourism certification schemes and in the accommodation sector, these issues have not been considered more broadly across sustainable tourism sectors. A strategy to address climate change in the tourism industry needs to consider a wide range of approaches, such as technological and managerial measures, sustainable transport and traveler behavior mitigation. Collaboration and partnerships will be key to the tourism sectors driving a global response to climate change, which also leads us to the final idea addressed today. Developing partnerships. Partnerships, whether at a local, regional, national, or global level, have the capacity to assist in creating a more sustainable tourism industry that can assist in addressing environmental and societal challenges. This includes many ideas such as development of financial systems with a commitment to good governance, the increasing of special needs of landlocked or small island developing countries, and cooperation with the private sector, including the benefits of new technologies. For example, ecotourism in some regions of the world has been advocated in most international sea turtle conservation strategies, and it has the capacity to benefit local communities through conservation programs, alternative sources of income for local residents, increased community support for conservation, and volunteer assistance and raising tourist awareness of the conservation and sustainability. And some of the data has shown that conservation of sea turtles has greater economic, social, and environmental benefits than various consumptive uses used traditionally by local communities. Partnerships between local groups and national and international organizations are an important component of these types of projects. Partnership opportunities exist through a number of mechanisms, such as direct community-based tourism development, stimulating small businesses for long-term partners, and buying from community-based tourism organizations or local tour operators. Partnerships were and continue to be an incredibly important part to Rivers Fiji and to the protection of the Upper Navua Conservation Area. This next short video was done to help bring awareness to threats to the Upper Navua Conservation Area, such as mining and a dam that's been proposed on the area. And hopefully this will talk to the unique aspects of the partnership there.
The island dream I expected. Endless beach, sand, surf, sunsets, even fire. I didn't expect this. I've been lucky to have seen rivers around the world. I've even run a few, source to sea. So I guess I thought I'd seen what rivers could offer, and the natural artwork they sculpt upon our landscapes. Honestly, no description could have prepared me for this. What the native people here refer to as the highway to their ancestors. Some call it the River of Eden. Others say it is the tropical Grand Canyon. Here, in Fiji, the locals call it the Navua River. Beyond this undescribable beauty, something else lured me here. The Upper Navua River is the only protected river of its kind in the South Pacific.
When I was born, I heard stories about this canyon. This is like a route or road to all our ancestors up in this area. That's a good thing that we Rivers Fiji have protected it from other developments like extracting gravel, mining, or damming the whole river.
About 15 years ago, a small rafting company did the unthinkable. They convinced local landowners and the government that the long-term economic benefit of conservation and tourism outweighed the quick money from extracting the resources or damming the river. I came here to understand how so few people could protect such a spectacular corridor inside Fiji's volcanic heart.
The Upper Navua River Canyon is one of the most beautiful rivers on Earth. It is a tight, narrow canyon that probably is less than 20 feet wide in some places, spans up to 250, 300 feet high. It has dark black canyon walls fringed with green palms and ferns with trickles of water and waterfalls throughout the whole course. During the rainy season, we easily would never be out of sight upstream or downstream of a waterfall. And I've never been in a place where that is even remotely possible.
Welcome to my office.
There are several approaches to conservation in Fiji. The approach that we've used here at the Upper Navua Conservation Area is with children. We anticipate that bringing the children out to experience benefits of grandparents or their elders' decision to protect the area, we hope will inspire them to continue to manage it well for tourism and also, more importantly, for future generations.
Conservation is something we have to wake up to every day and say, we have to protect this place. It's never a fight that is over.
children of the Matangali that own land adjacent to the river to have to know its value and know that they have the power to protect it or to lose it.
A Fijian friend told me, you don't have to dig very deep into the Upper Navua Conservation Area to find gold. As the stewards of this ancestral river showed me, value not only surrounds them in the form of beauty, but it also supports them.
I can say it's my best friend. I treated the river with respect every day I step onto it.
This is the real Fiji.
Well, we are certainly not naive to believe sustainable tourism is the panacea to all the challenges we face as a global society. We do believe it has the potential to support health and well-being of residents, to support biodiversity conservation efforts, and to support cultural heritage preservation while creating a mechanism for education, sustained economic development, and equal opportunities for women and human rights, ultimately working towards a system of positive change. I'd like to close in the words of Wendell Berry, one of my champions. He says that this world, this creation belongs in a limited sense to us, for we may rightfully require certain things of it, the things necessary to keep us fully alive as the kind of creatures we are. But we also belong to it, and it also makes certain rightful claims upon us that we leave it undiminished, not just to our children, but to all the creatures who live in it and after us. And to do this, we must take back our country's watershed, watershed by watershed, its seas, its plains, our valleys, our wetlands, and coasts, to reclaim the places that give form to our culture and that give life to our families. Thank you.